So we'll start with prayers, and then we'll do a meditation. Last week I spoke about the second. Oh, what was that? There's an echo. Maybe I turn off this volume.
I believe if you turn the volume down on your computer.
So last week I was talking about the second of the four establishments of mindfulness, which is on feelings, and we didn't have time to meditate on it. So I thought to start tonight with a little bit of meditation on that.
Venerable Sergeant,
so we'll do that after the prayers, and then continue with the new material for tonight.
Venerable, we're still getting an echo. I think you need to turn the volume on your speaker off.
You read them? And while reciting the prayers, you might like to imagine the Buddha in front of you, made of light, very pure and radiant, blissful, emanating all these excellent qualities, enlightened qualities, compassion, love, patience, generosity, wisdom, and so on. So try to feel you're in the presence of one who's totally transformed themselves and freed their minds from all disturbing thoughts and emotions, and cultivated all the positive states of mind to their highest degree, and is there to help us in a totally non-critical, non-judgmental way, just accepting us as we are, and just really caring about us, wanting us to be free of suffering and the causes of suffering, wanting us to be happy and have the causes of happiness, wanting to bring us to the state of enlightenment as well. So Buddha is with us 24/7, every minute, every second. Someone we can always turn to, rely on whenever we feel the need for help and guidance. So even if you have difficulty visualizing, try to at least feel that the Buddha is there, radiating all these positive qualities, positive energy. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. Reverently I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. I present clouds of every type of offering, actual and imagined. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time and rejoice in the merit of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until the end of cyclic existence and turn the wheel of Dharma for living beings. I dedicate my own merits and those of all others to the great enlightenment. This ground, anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kam Niryatayami. So let's recite the mantra of the Buddha 3 times. And while reciting that, imagine light flowing from the Buddha into yourself, filling your body completely down to the tiniest particles and all the space in between them. And also filling your mind with all this positive energy, positive qualities, clearing away any confusion, disturbing thoughts and attitudes in your mind, and blessing your mind so that you can attain the same qualities and realizations that the Buddha has in his mind. Ayata Om Mune Mune Maha Munaye So Tayata Om Mune Mune Maha Munaye So Ayata Om Mune Mune Maha Munaye So. So take a few minutes to settle yourself down in a comfortable position for meditation. If there's any tension anywhere in your body, maybe you had a busy day, had some difficult experiences, there might be some tension left from that. Imagine that it melts and flows away, flows out of you, sinks into the earth and disappears, leaving your body feeling as light and relaxed, free of tension as possible. And relax your mind. If there are any thoughts in your mind that are left over from things you were doing today, or thoughts about what you're going to do later or tomorrow or any time in the future, put all those thoughts aside and just let your mind, your awareness be right here in the present moment and present place. Then take a few more moments to think about why you're here. If you already have a clear positive motivation, like bodhicitta, or some form of altruism, then just bring that up. And if not, spend a few moments generating the wish to be of benefit to others as much as you can, and wanting to learn something here tonight that will help you be more helpful to others. Okay, so now let's do a little meditation on feelings. This is an ever-present mental factor. Every moment, with every experience we have, there is always a feeling, one of three types of feelings: pleasant or unpleasant or neutral, neither pleasant nor unpleasant. So start by thinking back over your day from the time you woke up and see if you can remember having feelings, either pleasant ones, unpleasant ones, or neutral ones. Those are harder to recognize, so you might only be able to recognize pleasant and unpleasant ones. Just try to remember as many of those as you can. So a feeling occurs with every experience we have. When we see something, we hear a sound, smell an odor, taste a taste, feel a sensation in our body, and have a thought or memory or fantasy in our mind. So with every one of those 6 types of experiences, there's always a feeling. So just see if you can remember some of the feelings you had today in these, accompanying these 6 types of experience. Now, choose one of the feelings you remember having today, either a pleasant or an unpleasant one, and see if you can remember if that feeling led to a disturbing emotion. Pleasant usually leads to some form of desire, attachment, craving, clinging, and unpleasant usually leads to some form of anger, aversion, even hatred. See if you can recall any such experience that happened to you today. Now, just let your mind awareness be in the present moment. Put aside thoughts of past, earlier today, and so on, and just be right here, right now, present moment, present place. And just be aware of whatever's arising in your mind. Different perceptions, like hearing sounds, feeling sensations in your body, thoughts, memories, whatever arises, just notice it, but don't get caught up, carried away. Instead, see if you can notice which feeling accompanies these different experiences. Don't worry if you can't notice all of them. Even if you can only notice one or two or three, that's good enough. Remember, feelings are impermanent. They come and they go. So pleasant feelings last only a moment and then they're gone. Same with unpleasant feelings. So it's not easy to catch them because they're so fleeting. But just see if you can. Just try to be aware of whatever feelings arise in your mind right now, moment by moment. And when you do notice a feeling, see if you can also notice if it leads to either attachment or aversion, liking or disliking, being attracted to or repulsed, rejecting. So now when you feel ready, you can come out of the meditation, open your eyes, change your position if you need to. So as I mentioned last time, in the beginning, we may only be able to notice really coarse, obvious feelings, pleasant, unpleasant feelings. But with more time, more practice, more experience, we'll start to notice more and more. And you can imagine there are people like in Southeast Asia, people living in monasteries and retreat centers and so on, and they're practicing all day long, practicing mindfulness. And so in that kind of situation, one would be able to really notice feelings. You don't have so many other things to distract your attention, and you're with a bunch of people who are all doing this kind of practice. So it'd be very conducive for being able to notice feelings. And the whole purpose of noticing feelings is so that we can catch them before they lead to disturbing emotions like craving or anger and so on. So anger, that's a particularly dangerous one. Feelings of dislike, aversion, anger, hatred, that if we're not careful, that can turn into aggressiveness and harmfulness, and then actually acting out harmful actions, which cause so much suffering for others and also for ourselves. So that's really the one we need to look out for. Craving and desire and attachment, those are problematic too, but they're kind of more subtle, not always so dangerous, not so harmful. But if we really want to be free of samsara, a cyclic existence, then that is another big obstacle to overcome. And I wanted to talk about a sutra. It's in the Pali Canon. And I don't know if it's in the Tibetan canon or not. It's very well known in the Theravada tradition. The name of the sutra is Satipatthana Sutra, and it contains this teaching that the Buddha gave using the analogy of arrows, being shot by an arrow. So he says, an ordinary person who's not knowledgeable about the spiritual path and not experienced in the spiritual path, when they experience pain, I think it could also, be any kind of problem. They get worried, they complain, they cry and wail. The mind becomes disturbed and deranged. And so this person has two painful feelings. There's the original problem, like it could be physical pain or it could be some other kind of problem. So there's that problem. And then on top of that, the way they react mentally and emotionally, being all unhappy and upset and complaining and blaming and so on, that just makes another layer of problems. And so he said, this is like a person who's been shot with one arrow, one poisoned arrow, which is already painful enough, and then they shoot themselves with another arrow. Have you heard that analogy before? It's very helpful to think that way. That by the way we react to problems, we can sometimes make them worse. We can increase our suffering rather than relieve our suffering. And this happens because of lack of understanding of the true nature of things, and being attached to pleasure and being unhappy when there's anything unpleasant. So not having equanimity, but just wanting pleasant experiences and not wanting any unpleasant experiences. So when unpleasant experiences happen, then the mind gets all unhappy and upset. And in addition to all this unhappiness, they may try to escape from the suffering by immersing themselves in distractions. So we know that very well. We try to get away from problems by watching movies, listening to music, drinking, taking drugs, eating, going out and doing something. So we try to run away from the situation rather than deal with it. And that can also make things worse. The ways we use to escape from problems sometimes makes things worse. So this is how a ordinary person reacts. But then on the other hand, a person who has learned the spiritual path and is developed, is mature in the spiritual path, when they experience pain, and they do not worry, complain, cry, and wail. Their mind doesn't become disordered and deranged. So they only have the painful feelings in the body, like the original problem, that first problem, but they don't have this additional one of the mind getting all upset and reacting. So this is like a person who's shot with just one arrow, and they don't shoot themselves with a second arrow. And this happens because they understand things as they are, and they're not afflicted with attachment to pleasure, aversion to what is unpleasant, and ignorance regarding neutral feelings. So I think the reason this analogy, the sutra in this analogy is well known is because it's very apt, it's very appropriate. I think we can really relate to it. We can really see how this happens in our experience. And and I think, we would all like to be able to respond in a more mature and intelligent way when problems happen, rather than exacerbating them with additional worry and upsetness and so on and so forth. And so the key to being able to do that, or one way of being able to do that, is to understand feelings as they are. Have a good understanding of feelings. For example, the fact that they are impermanent. So that's really, really helpful, just to realize that feelings are impermanent. Painful feelings, pleasant feelings, any kind of feeling is impermanent. It lasts a moment and then it's gone. And so even if we have a painful feeling or we have an unpleasant experience, it's not going to last forever. I mean, it may last more than a moment. It may last a few hours or a few days. But if we can remember impermanence, remember that this whole situation, as well as our reactions, our thoughts and our feelings and emotions and so on, they're all impermanent and they're all going to pass. That awareness, that understanding, that memory, or that reminding ourselves of that, can be very helpful to relax, take it easy, let things come and let things go, rather than feeling we have to do something to get rid of this problem or run away from the problem or whatever. So that's one thing that's very helpful, is understanding the impermanent nature of feelings. And also training ourselves to not react with aversion to what is unpleasant and attachment to what is pleasant. So training ourselves, there's different methods that help us to deal with our aversion and our anger, and other methods that help us deal with our attachment and our craving. So learning those methods, training in those methods, getting familiar with those methods, then those tendencies will become weaker, and we'll be able to manage them rather than being overwhelmed by them, being controlled by them. So these are the main points with regard to this particular type of mindfulness. The second one is mindfulness of feelings. It's learning to recognize feelings when they arise, trying not to let the feelings lead to disturbing emotions, attachment, aversion, and so on. And remembering their impermanence. And this practice is connected to the second of the Four Noble Truths, which is the truth of origins, the origins of suffering, because it enables us to understand that if we're not mindful and careful about our feelings and the emotions that arise from our feelings, then we can create more suffering for ourselves. Feelings can lead to delusions, and then delusions motivate us to act, and then those actions become karma, which create causes more suffering in the future, keeping us in samsara. Okay, so there's more to be said, but we're short of time, and I have two more, the last two establishments of mindfulness to cover. The third of the four is mindfulness of mind or consciousness. And there's different ways that this is explained in the different traditions. In the Pali tradition, the Theravada tradition, it's kind of complicated. There's 16 different objects that you meditate on. I'm not going to go into all of those. But in our tradition, the Geluk at least tradition and within Mahayana, mindfulness of the mind means being mindful of our 6 types of consciousness, 6 consciousnesses. So that means seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, tactile consciousness, body consciousness, whatever experiences we have with our body. And then the 6th consciousness is the mental consciousness. That includes our thoughts, our memories, our dreams, our fantasies, our emotions, and so on. So just becoming more mindful, more aware of these 6 different experiences, which are again impermanent. Every experience we have in our mind is impermanent, lasts a moment, and then it's gone. Nothing in the mind is permanent. And so that's one thing to understand by doing this practice, is the impermanent nature of the mind. So I'll read something from His Holiness. This is from the book Following in the Buddha's Footsteps, volume 4 of the Library of Wisdom and Compassion. So the Dalai Lama says, mindfulness of the mind helps to overcome the distortion of believing what is impermanent to be permanent. So in other words, our mind is impermanent, and if we have a view that the mind is permanent, then that's wrong, that's a mistake. And he goes on to say, the mind of the past is now gone. The mind of the future has yet to come. So our past experiences, they're gone. They're not there anymore. We can remember them. We can have memories of our past experiences, but those experiences themselves are gone. They're no longer in the present. And then we may imagine future experiences. We don't really know what's going to happen in the future, but we often, I don't know about you, but I often fantasize, worry this is going to happen or that is going to happen, or I hope that this will happen and then that will happen and so on. So I think we spend a lot of time fantasizing about the future with hopes and dreams and plans. But those future experiences are not yet here. Yeah, they're not really here in the present. They're in the future. So the past is gone. The future isn't here yet. There's only the present mind. But the present mind, too, is ever changing and doesn't remain in the next nanosecond. Right? So even in the present, you try to grab onto the present mind, but you can't. Any mind you pay attention to or you notice in the present, and the next moment it's already gone. So he says, mindfulness of this subtle impermanent nature of the mind reduces fear of death. While actively dying, people often feel that they are becoming non-existent, and tremendous fear arises. This fear is based on self-grasping ignorance and feeds craving and clinging, which ripen the karmic seeds that propel another birth in samsara. So fear leads to craving, and craving leads to another rebirth. Relaxing that fear gives us more opportunity to meditate and possibly gain deep realizations at the time of death. Understanding 2 points diminishes the fear of the self vanishing at death. First point is, although a moment of mind doesn't remain in the next moment, the continuity of moments of mind is indestructible. So even though each moment of mind lasts only a moment, arises and it's gone, but there's always the next moment. And after that, the next moment. And after that, the next moment. So there's this continuity or this continuum of moments of mind that cannot be destroyed. So according to Mahayana Buddhism, this is, not all Buddhists believe this, but in Mahayana Buddhism, we believe that the mind is indestructible. It will never end. And the reason for that is there's nothing that can destroy the mind. There's no weapon, even, what's the most powerful weapon? Nuclear bomb, nuclear weapon, or chemical weapons, or AK-47s, or any kind of weapon that people have come up with cannot destroy the mind. I mean, the mind itself is a non-physical thing, non-physical, non-material. So of course it cannot be destroyed or damaged by anything physical. So there's nothing that can destroy the mind in the sense of making it stop, making it go out of existence. So it will just keep going, one moment after another, and another, and another, and another. So our mind will never end. So if we can get a sense of that, that can take away some of the fear that can arise at the time of death, feeling, I'm going out of existence. No, you're not. You're just moving to another life. This life is ending, but there'll be another one after that. And then the second point is, this is more difficult to understand. The I, the self, I, me, is designated or imputed independence on the mind. So we wrongly think there's a real solid I inside of us somewhere. But that's wrong. There is no such I. We feel like it's there, but it's not. When we look for it, we can't find it. That doesn't mean we don't exist. We do exist, but the way we exist is just being designated or imputed. I or me or whatever our name is just a name or a label imputed onto our body and mind, but mainly the mind. The main basis of imputation for the self is the mind, because that's what continues. Especially when we die, we leave this body behind, it becomes a corpse, but our mind continues. It keeps going, takes another life. So, so that's like the basis for the I or the self, the me. And since the mind, which is the basis for the I, since that will go on and never go out of existence, never be destroyed, then that means the self, a conventional self, a merely labeled self, will also go on existing and can never be destroyed, can never go out of existence. And eventually, according to Mahayana Buddhism, we'll all reach enlightenment, Buddhahood. And then we'll continue existing as an enlightened being with no more suffering and only being able to benefit others. So if we think about these, get used to these ideas, then this can relieve fear of death. So His Holiness says, by maintaining mindfulness on the mind, we will be able to perceive directly its subtle changing nature and understand that even though the mind is transient, it changes, its continuity continues. So let's pause here and do a little meditation on this. So once again, let your body relax. Let your mind relax in the present. Be aware of the breath flowing in and out for a short time to settle the mind, make it more calm and clear. And then open or expand your awareness to notice the various experiences happening in your mind. Some of these are perceptions, hearing sounds, feeling sensations in the body, maybe smelling odors, tasting something in your mouth. Or they could be mental experiences, emotions, memories, thoughts. So don't get involved in any of these. Just notice them, let them go, and then notice the next one. And see if you can be aware of how the mind is changing, how it's this stream, like a river or a stream, made up of mental states, mental events, each one arising and passing, arising and passing. So each of these experiences that we notice is mind, meaning it's non-physical, non-material, and it is aware. It always has some object that it is aware of, that it knows. And each of these moments of mind is momentary, lasts a very short time, a fraction of a moment, then it's gone, and the next one arises, and that's gone, and that next arises, and that's gone. So it's this continuously flowing, continuously changing stream of momentary mental events. And it will continue like this for the remainder of our life. Every day, minute, every year, on and on, until we come to the end of our life and breathe our last breath. But even then, our mind will not go out of existence. It will not cease, become non-existent. It will continue in another form, in another life. And eventually, at some point, after creating the causes for enlightenment over a long time, our mind will become enlightened mind, Buddha's mind, free of all negative, disturbing experiences, and having only positive, pure experiences. No more suffering, only peace and bliss. And having lots of abilities, energies to be able to work for the benefit of others. As Shantideva says in his beautiful text, as long as space remains, as long as sentient beings remain, I too will remain to dispel the misery of the world. Okay, so you can relax, open your eyes, come out of the meditation. Another way of practicing mindfulness of the mind is to become aware of the conventional nature of the mind, its clear and knowing nature. So in that last meditation we were doing, we were simply noticing the impermanent nature of the mind, how each experience arises and passes and so on. But this next one is trying to recognize this basic nature of the mind, which is said to be clear and knowing. Clear meaning it's not physical, not material, not tangible. And also another explanation of the term clear is it's like a mirror. Just as a mirror will reflect whatever object is put in front of it, our mind also reflects the many objects that we perceive and remember and think of and so on. I don't fully understand that, but that's what they say. Yeah, the mind has this mirror-like reflective nature. But being able to recognize the clear knowing nature of the mind is difficult to do, because to be able to do that, we need to make our mind really calm and clear, like stop our thoughts. Most of the time, so many thoughts coming and going in the mind, and also to stop paying attention to sense objects. So even when we're sitting still and trying to meditate, we hear sounds, we feel sensations in our body. If we have our eyes open, then we're also seeing things visually and so on. So our mind is often distracted by sense experiences, sense objects. So we need to be able to stop those as well. That's not easy. And then keep just observing the mind, and eventually one is able to catch a glimpse of this clear knowing nature, which is like a still forest pool. So if there's a pool of water in the forest and there's nothing that's disturbing it, no wind, nobody's throwing rocks in it, nobody's jumping into it, there's just really calm and peaceful. So in a similar way, our mind is like that, just very calm and peaceful and clear, and we can see this clear knowing nature of it. And sometimes His Holiness the Dalai Lama talks about, he was once in Ladakh, which is in India, but very high up in the mountains next to Tibet, and it's a very peaceful, quiet place. So he was staying up there and doing a retreat. And while he was on retreat, I don't know how long he was on retreat for, but he said during his retreat, he was able to get this glimpse of the clear knowing nature of the mind. But then he said when he left retreat and resumed his normal busy activities, then he wasn't able to maintain that experience anymore. So it does seem to require a special environment, special situation to be able to catch this glimpse of the conventional nature of the mind. So it is more difficult, but it is another way of practicing to gain insight into the nature of the mind. And he says that one insight we can gain by noticing, being aware of the clear and knowing nature of the mind, is that the disturbing thoughts and emotions are not permanent. They're not permanent parts of our mind, but they are impermanent, coming and going, and therefore they can be eliminated. So this is a really important insight to have, because otherwise we have the tendency to think that our mind is always going to be messed up. You know, we have so many thoughts and disturbing thoughts, disturbing emotions, and so on, and we may feel as if that's the way it's going to be forever. We'll never be able to free our mind from these disturbances. But it's said that when you can gain an experience of this clear knowing nature of the mind and increase that experience, become more familiar with that experience, then you become more convinced that delusions like attachment, aversion, and so on are not in the nature of their mind. They're not permanent parts of the mind. They can be eliminated. They can be overcome. So His Holiness says, through these two insights, one is the transient nature of our thoughts and experiences. They come and go. They're impermanent. They're not permanent. And the other insight is that emotions, disturbing emotions, are not in the nature of the mind. So by gaining these insights, we can see the possibility of eliminating mental defilements and know that attaining true cessations is possible. So this is how mindfulness of the mind leads to understanding true cessations, the third truth. So again, each of the four foundations or four establishments of mindfulness is connected with one of the four truths. So this one, mindfulness of the mind, the third one, is connected with the third noble truth. It enables us to understand at least the possibility of true cessation. True cessation means when you have eliminated at least a portion of disturbing emotions. You don't have to get rid of all of them at once, but gradually getting rid of the disturbing emotions. So even just eliminating a portion of a disturbing emotion such that it doesn't arise anymore. That's the meaning of a true cessation. So when you can see that in yourself, your own experience, you can see that the disturbing emotions are not permanent, not in the nature of mind, not like rooted in the mind and impossible to extract, then you can understand, oh, it is possible to attain cessation, true cessations. Okay, so then the fourth establishment of mindfulness is called mindfulness of phenomena. And this word phenomena, it's chö in Tibetan, which we also translate as Dharma. So the word Dharma can have different meanings. It sometimes means like spiritual teachings, spiritual practices, but Dharma can also just mean things that exist. So we usually translate that as phenomena. So this term phenomena in Buddhist philosophy is another term for existent. Anything that exists is a phenomenon. So usually phenomena refers to all things that exist, animate, inanimate, in samsara, out of samsara, pure, impure, and so on. Whatever exists is a phenomenon. But here in the Four Establishments of Mindfulness, when they talk about mindfulness of phenomena, it refers just to a portion of things that exist rather than everything. And in our tradition, this fourth type of mindfulness phenomena refers to everything that wasn't already covered in the first three. So whatever's left over. Okay, so the first was the body, the second was feelings, the third was mind, the six consciousnesses. So the fourth includes everything else. And the main phenomena in this fourth establishment of mindfulness are mental factors. So I don't know if here at the center you've had teachings on low rig or mind and awareness. My guess is in the past there have been courses on this. This is a topic where you learn about the mind, all the different types of mind and different mental factors. It's quite complex, but also very important and very helpful, because among the mental factors, some are virtuous, and those are things we want to cultivate and have more of. Things like faith and compassion and love. And then some of the mental factors are afflicted in the sense that they disturb our mind and bring suffering. So those are things like anger, attachment, and so on. And then there's other mental factors that are not really virtuous or non-virtuous, but they're still very helpful. So concentration, mindfulness, wisdom. So those are also things we need to cultivate on the path. And if anyone is interested in this and has time and energy, Wisdom, the publishing company, they have these courses as well. They call it Wisdom Experience, I think. So they offer these courses. And there's a 10-week course that's starting next week, actually, called Freedom Through Correct Knowing. The teacher is Geshe Namdak, who's from Holland. He's the first FPMT Geshe, the first Western student to get the Geshe degree. And he's been living in England, teaching at our center in London for the last few years, but he teaches in other places as well. So he's teaching this course. So he's very, very knowledgeable. And in this course, it will talk about the mind and different aspects of the mind and mental factors and so on. So if you really want to learn that, that's an opportunity coming up. Freedom Through Correct Knowing. So Lama Tsongkhapa, when talking about this fourth type of mindfulness, he says that the main phenomena that we need to be mindful of are the mental factors that need to be developed. Those are the beneficial ones, like love, compassion, faith, energy, joyous energy, and so on. So those are virtuous mental factors. We have them already, but they're probably not very well developed, and they could be developed more. So we need to be mindful of those and increase those as much as we can. And then on the other hand, there are other mental factors that are afflicted and the cause of suffering, and also they obstruct our spiritual development. We need to be aware of those and work on overcoming them. So those would be things like anger, attachment, jealousy, arrogance, miserliness, and so on. So that, according to Lama Tsongkhapa, that's the main practice with this fourth type of mindfulness, is being aware of our mind. And when we notice afflicted mental states arising, afflictive emotions arising, then realizing, knowing that these are afflicted and we don't want to follow them because they're just going to get us into trouble, and then learning how to deal with them, manage them, so we can keep them under control and free ourselves from them. And then also being aware of the positive, beneficial mental factors and putting energy into those so that they grow, they increase. And so this fourth close placement of mindfulness on phenomena is connected with the fourth noble truth, which is true paths. When we use the word path in Buddhist philosophy, it's a mental state. It's a realization. It's something we develop in our mind that enables us to move and make progress towards enlightenment. The main path, the main true path we need to develop is the wisdom of emptiness, the wisdom directly realizing emptiness. So that's the main true path, and that's a mental factor. Wisdom is a mental factor. So we want to learn how to cultivate and develop that particular mental factor. But other true paths, there's other true paths as well, and they would be the other positive mental states like compassion and love and so on. So those are also true paths. So by practicing this fourth establishment of mindfulness, then we engage in true paths, the realizations that enable us to attain liberation and enlightenment. So that's just a very brief coverage of the four establishments of mindfulness. There's much more about each of them, different ways of practicing them, and again, it's not enough just to know these practices, but they need to be developed. And it's maybe not so easy to do in normal daily life if you're busy working and doing other things. But if you have the chance to do a retreat, to be in a retreat situation and meditate more, spend more time meditating and going deeper in your meditation, then that will be really beneficial. But on the other hand, even if we're very busy and we can't do all four of these practices, to cultivate mindfulness, we do have mindfulness. It's already part of our mind. And if we can cultivate it further, starting with meditation, practicing meditation, and for example, meditating on the breath and just training our mind to stay on one object, the breath, bring it back whenever it wanders away. So in that way, we are training our mindfulness. It's like developing our mindfulness. And that enables us to be much more aware of other things going on, what our body's doing, what our mind is doing, what our emotions are doing. And then even when we get up from meditation and we're doing other things, we'll naturally have greater mindfulness, greater awareness of what we're doing, what our body's doing, what our thoughts are doing, what our emotions are doing, and so on. And that's a very helpful way of curbing our emotions so that they don't just arise and take over and we get caught up in them and carried away by them and so on. So it really is helpful for living ethically, refraining from harmful actions with our body, speech, and mind, increasing positive actions of body, speech, and mind. So there's a lot of positive ramifications, positive results, consequences that we can experience just with training ourselves in mindfulness, even not talking about all these 4 different practices of mindfulness. But anyway, even though the time has been short, I thought it would be helpful to introduce this and maybe inspire you, encourage you to look into it more and practice it more. Any questions?
Yes, Venerable.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if the way that you look at these 4 different kinds of mindfulness, do you see any way that they are connected with each other, or they feed into each other, or do you look at them separately?
Well, I think my understanding is in the beginning, when one is first learning and training in these, it's better to focus just on one at a time, and probably best to start with the body because that's easier. It's something we can see, it's visible, tangible. So it's just easier to be mindful of our body. Feelings are more subtle. So after practicing mindfulness of the body, getting more experience with that, we can become more aware of feelings. And then mind is even more subtle. So there's kind of a progression from more obvious and gross to more subtle. So it's best to go in that order, the way the Buddha taught. So I think you can train in each one individually. And then if my understanding is, I haven't done much of this myself, but if you get really proficient at each of them individually, you can also combine them. So for example, if you're sitting and meditating, maybe you start off with mindfulness of the body, but then you notice, a feeling arising, or you notice a disturbing emotion arising. So then you would pay attention to that. So you would, I think, my understanding is you would sort of weave in and out of them and bring them all together.
You have a question online, Venerable?
Hello, Venerable. Is there a specific
Any
author?
question from online participants?
Yeah, I'm talking. Do you hear me?
We can hear you. We can hear you. Can you hear us?
I hear you, Michael. I don't think she hears me.
She hears us.
Oh, I turned the sound off. That's right. Okay.
Hello,
Okay, yes.
Venerable.
Now, Khadro.
Can you talk now?
Yes, can you hear me now?
It's a little low.
A little low.
Okay, now it's up. Okay, yes, now?
I was wondering if you had besides the sutra, is there an author of these 4 mindfulnesses that you suggest?
Well, there's
Thank
a really good book by Joseph Goldstein. He's long-term practitioner, mainly in the Theravada tradition. And he actually gave a series of lectures on the Satipatthana Sutra. I think it was like 42 lectures going through the sutra and really going in depth with each of these practices. And then it was edited and published as a book. It's simply called, I think it's called Mindfulness. It's published by Sounds True. Sounds True is this company that makes these like audio, I don't know, courses that you can listen to, but they also publish books. So yeah, it's kind of a big, thick book like this, but it's really wonderful to read. And you can also, I think there's a way you can get access to the lectures if you prefer to listen to his talks. It's very, very nice. I did that once when I was in a retreat, and every day I would listen to a little bit and eventually got through most of them, I think. So that's a really good one. And then Bhante Gunaratana, who's a Theravada monk, a Sri Lankan monk who lives over in Virginia or West Virginia. He's been in America for a long time, and he's written many books on mindfulness. So he has a book on these four, I don't remember the title of it, but yeah, 4 foundations of mindfulness. And it's very simple, very clear, very accessible.
Okay, thank you.
So those are good ones to start with. There's lots of others as well. I haven't read all of them, but those are ones that I can recommend. And then this other book I mentioned, it's called Following in the Buddha's Footsteps. It's one of these books by His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Venerable Thupten Chodron. It's like a whole series of books. This is volume 4. And in that book, it starts off with refuge, talks about refuge, and then a long section on calm abiding. And then towards the end of the book, last couple of chapters, there's information on the 4 establishments of mindfulness from both the Theravada and Mahayana. So it's a little complicated because it's, both traditions, but it's quite a rich source of information. Anyone
Thank
else?
you, Venerable.
I have a question about, this is related to Sunday, but it's also, I think, related to this. When we start to notice something that we don't want to continue on in, say like that we would go into emptiness. Well, I don't really know how to go into emptiness. All right. So my version of that is imagining I'm in emptiness when I just go into third eye. And everything does quiet down when I do that. But I wondered what.
So are you saying that if we notice something in ourselves, like maybe some negative attitude, right, some negative emotion, right, negative reaction to something, and we want to deal with that, we don't want to get caught up in it, should we, well, it is recommended that we remember emptiness, but you have to understand emptiness. So you have to have studied and thought about and meditated on and really understood emptiness for that to work. So if you don't have that experience, I know I don't. I think impermanence, for me, impermanence is really helpful. It's easier to understand. It's easier to understand impermanence. And just the fact, just reminding myself that all of my experiences and all of my, whatever, every aspect of me, body and mind, it's impermanent. It doesn't last. It's changing moment by moment by moment. And so this mental state that's very disturbing thought or emotion or whatever, is just a momentary thing. It comes and goes. What happens is when some problem comes up in our mind, some emotion or whatever, we tend to get kind of obsessed with it, and we keep thinking about it, and we sort of make it last longer by adding a whole lot of other things on top of it, and making stories out of it, writing novels and plays and movies, just really getting carried away with it. And so if we can recognize that's going on and say, no, this isn't right, just go back to the original experience and realize it's transitory. It's just a momentary mental state, not permanent, not lasting forever. I don't need to make a big deal of this. So for me, that's really helpful, just to remember impermanence. Whatever it is, even however bad it is, it's not going to last. It's going to end. So that's relatively easy. Because to be able to use emptiness as an antidote to disturbing thoughts and emotions may not work unless you understand emptiness. I mean, some teachers like Lama Zopa Rinpoche will say, just say to yourself, it's not true. Whatever your mind is saying is not true. It's false. I haven't found that particularly effective, but you might. So you could try that. Because they say that, every experience we have, every perception we have is erroneous. We're seeing things incorrectly. We're seeing things wrongly. But just saying that to myself, I don't find that particularly effective because it still seems so real. But impermanence is something that is more effective.
Like it neutralizes.
Yeah.
Oh,
And also dependent arising. I mean, dependent arising is one of the best methods for accessing emptiness. So it takes a little bit more thought and analysis, but just to think about whatever it is that's the problem, how it came about due to so many other factors, causes and conditions, and many things had to come together for this to arise. And so it's dependent on all those other factors for its existence. And also on parts. It's made up of different parts. So I find that helpful as well. Otherwise it can seem as if it's so solid and real and permanent. It's always been there and it always will be there. But if you understand, no, so many things came together, causes and conditions came together for this to be there. And it's not permanent. It's going to change. It's going to go away. So that also takes away some of the heaviness of that problem or that situation, whatever it is. Is that helpful?
it is. I mean, one of the things that I've noticed over the last few years is something that I would call resilience, but it's the same as impermanence. Like, this past week was difficult. There were difficult things, very difficult things that came up. And, but I seemed over it by the weekend. It's like, oh.
Yeah.
And so, even though I'm still offering prayers and doing things, it was a death in the family, and it's shocking. So it was like, I just felt it as though it was a family issue. It wasn't just that person. It was an expression of maybe generations of family situations that hadn't ever been dealt with. And so I felt quite overwhelmed by it, but then it's over with. So I usually would refer to that as resilience, but it's like impermanence. Like, yes, this is painful, it's difficult, but it's not good. I have to remind myself it doesn't have to last that long.
Well, it's also helpful just to think about times in the past where you faced some big problem and it seemed like it would be there forever, but it passed. And this one will too. All things pass.
And I did feel like in Monday I was in equanimity a lot, like much of the day. And I felt that was gained from the week, the work that we've done, that I've done with you. I've experienced here. It was very like, what a relief to be in equanimity much of the day.
Okay, there's something I wanted to talk about before we finish. I want to set the record straight about something I said on Sunday. I think it was Sunday afternoon. And I was talking about how some monks, like in Japan, they were forced to get married by an emperor. And then I also mentioned that Russia took over Mongolia and forced the monks to marry. And somebody questioned if that was true. And so I did some research, and what I learned was it's not completely true. So I want to correct myself. It isn't the case that Russia took over Mongolia, but Mongolia was ruled by its own communist party from 1921 to 1990, almost 70 years. It was a communist country, but it had its own communist party. But still, it was very close to Russia, to the Soviet Union. They had very close ties, and the Soviet Union sent advisors and troops. And some of the articles I read actually said Mongolia was like a puppet state or a satellite state of the Soviet Union. And so I think that's where I got that idea that Russia took over. But so I want to correct that. It's not true. But I had watched these videos some years ago about things that happened in the 1930s in Mongolia. And this was the time when Stalin was the head of the Communist Party in Soviet Union, and he carried out all these purges. So there's different estimates. Between 700,000 and over 1 million people were murdered, or they were sent to these camps where many died of starvation and cold and disease. So this was happening in the Soviet Union in those years. And during that time, Stalin also sent members of this security force. They're called the NKVD, internal security forces. They're the ones who are carrying out all these purges, all these murders and so on. So he sent some of those people to Mongolia, where they also carried out purges. And this was between 1937 and 1939. And during that time, they're not completely sure how many people, but it could be between 20,000 and 35,000 people were executed. And that included 17 or 18,000 monks, Buddhist monks, but also aristocrats, intelligentsia, political dissidents, and so on. So, yeah, they just rounded up monks, drove them out to this remote area. There was a big hole. They just shot them in the head and dumped their bodies in this big hole. So they started discovering these mass graves in 1991, and there's still many that haven't been found. But anyway, there was this incredible persecution of Buddhism and Buddhist monks in Mongolia, and part of it was done by Mongolian communists, but part of it was done by people from the Soviet Union. So that's how I got the idea that, it was people from Russia who were involved in this. And also, and this thing that I said about monks being forced to marry, I couldn't find any information about that. The monks who survived, who didn't get killed, they took off their robes and went back to lay life. So probably some of them did marry because their monasteries were destroyed. 742 monasteries were destroyed. So there was no monasteries for them. They couldn't practice their religion. And so probably many of them did go back to lay life. But I do want to check that. I think it was a friend of mine. I have this friend who was a nun. He is a nun, and she spent several years in Mongolia teaching at an FPMT center there. I think I heard it from her that some monks were forced to marry, but I need to confirm that. So I just want to, correct what I said. It's not the case that Russia took over Mongolia, but they were still very influential in what happened in Mongolia. And it does seem that Stalin was behind the persecution of Buddhism. It happened in Russia as well. There's certain areas in Russia where there were a lot of Buddhists people, Buddhist monks, and they were also persecuted and killed and sent off to gulags and so on. But fortunately, for Mongolia anyway, in the 90s, communism was overthrown, Mongolia became a democracy, and there's been a big revival of Buddhism. So they rebuilt monasteries, and many people, men and women, have become monks and nuns, and they're studying. Some are going to India to study and so on. So things have changed for the better. But yeah, it was just horrific what happened during the 30s. And yeah, so anyway, I do apologize if my comment offended anybody. I didn't mean to imply that the whole of Russia and all the Russian people were responsible for these persecutions. Because I think probably the majority of people in the Soviet Union were totally opposed to what was going on. And they suffered too. Probably every family in Russia suffered under these purges, but they were powerless to stop them. So anyway, I just wanted to clear that up. I didn't want to leave people with some mistaken information. Does that make sense, what I'm saying? Okay. Okay, so we will stop there and dedicate the merit, the positive energy we've created, with the dedication prayers, including request for quick return, swift return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. Incomparably kind and supreme Tenzin Gyatso, the wish-fulfilling, wish-granting jewel, source of every benefit and happiness in this world, may you have a long life and all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. Peerless teacher and assembly of the children of the victorious ones, Shravakas, Prāsaṅgika Buddhas, Venerable Losang, father and sons, together with the lineage masters, all the objects of refuge of the infinite lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now. Holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable, Venerable Guru, to you I make request. While striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and from other living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. What a great loss. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the three jewels and the great waves of bodhicitta of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. So, thank you very much for inviting me. It's been very nice to come here and meet all of you and do these classes. I hope it's been helpful for you. And I wish everything will go well for your future classes and courses and teachers coming and so on. Thank you.